20 years ago, in a manor house that rose from the Siberian landscape like a frozen cathedral, a man made a decision that would define the rest of his life. Outside, the snow fell in thick curtains of white, erasing the world piece by piece. Inside, two hearts were about to break. Viktor Romanov was 32 years old. He had inherited his father's industrial empire at 25, and in 7 short years, he had tripled its worth. Steel mills, oil refineries, shipping lanes that stretched from Vladivostok to Rotterdam. The Romanov name was spoken with reverence in boardrooms and with fear in the shadows where business became something darker. But on this night, with the wind screaming against the windows and the fire casting long shadows across the study floor, Viktor Romanov was not thinking about business. He was thinking about the woman standing before him, her eyes glistening with tears. She was too proud to shed. Her name was Naya. She had come to the estate 3 years ago as a housekeeper, a quiet, brilliant woman who spoke 4 languages and carried herself with a dignity that made the other staff defer to her instinctively. Viktor had noticed her on the first day. By the first month, he was finding excuses to be wherever she was. By the first year, he had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with her, and now he was sending her away. He crossed to his desk and retrieved a small velvet box from the locked drawer. His hands were steady. Viktor's hands were always steady, but inside something was fracturing beyond repair. The Kozlov group had sent him photographs that morning. Surveillance images of Naya leaving the market in the village. Naya walking through the gardens, Nia standing at the window of her quarters silhouetted against the light. The message was clear. We know about her. We can reach her whenever we want. The Kozlovs were his rivals. They had been circling his empire for years, looking for any weakness, any pressure point they could exploit. And now they had found one. Viktor opened the velvet box. Inside lay a gold locket, ornate and ancient, with the Romanov crest etched into its surface. It had belonged to his mother, the only thing she had left him before the Kozlovs had arranged her accident on the mountain road 15 years ago. He held it out to Nia. She stared at him, uncomprehending. He watched her face shift from confusion to disbelief to a dawning, devastating understanding. He told her she had to leave, tonight. He told her there was money waiting, enough to start a new life somewhere far from Russia, far from his enemies, far from him. He told her she would forget he existed, and in time she would find happiness with someone who could offer her more than danger and death. She asked him if he was serious. Her voice was barely a whisper, almost lost beneath the howling wind. He said nothing. He simply held the locket toward her, his face carved from the same stone as the mountains outside. She demanded an explanation. Her voice rose now, breaking the careful control she always maintained. She reminded him of the promises he had made, the late nights when he had held her in the darkness and confessed that she was the only person who made him feel human. She asked him how he could stand there, offering her his mother's locket like a consolation prize, as if 3 years of love could be packed away and shipped to another continent. Viktor felt every word like a blade between his ribs, but he did not waver. He could not waver. If he showed weakness now, she would refuse to leave, and if she refused to leave, the Kozlovs would eventually take her, the same way they had taken his mother, his uncle, everyone who had ever made the mistake of mattering to Viktor Romanov. So he lied. He told her she had been a distraction, a pleasant diversion from the pressures of running an empire. He told her she was a housekeeper, nothing more, and that he had been a fool to let things progress this far. He told her she did not belong in his world and she never would. He watched her face crumble. He watched the light die in her eyes, and every word he spoke carved a piece of his soul away, because none of it was true. She was not a distraction. She was his salvation, but salvation was a luxury men like Viktor could not afford. She took the locket from his hand. Her fingers brushed his, and for one desperate moment, he almost broke. Almost told her the truth, almost begged her to stay while he dismantled the Kozlovs piece by piece until no threat remained. But almost was not enough. She walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame, her back to him, her shoulders trembling with suppressed sobs. She told him he was a coward. She said he was not sending her away to protect her. He was sending her away because loving her required more courage than destroying his enemies, and he had never been brave enough for that. Then she stepped into the corridor, and the door closed behind her with a sound like a coffin lid settling into place. Viktor stood alone in his study, surrounded by the artifacts of his ancestors, and felt something inside him calcify into ice. He did not know that Nia was carrying his children. He did not know that the money he had provided would run out in 3 months, leaving her stranded in a foreign city with no resources and no protection. He did not know that 20 years later, he would still see her face every time he closed his eyes. All he knew was that he had done what was necessary, and that he would never forgive himself for it. Outside, a black car pulled away from the estate, its headlights cutting weak paths through the blizzard. Inside that car, Nia pressed her hand against her stomach, against the secret she had not yet told him, and made a vow. Her children would never know the monster who fathered them. They would never know this world of blood and betrayal and love sacrificed on the altar of power. She would raise them in light, far from his shadows, and if Viktor Romanov wanted to pretend she had never existed, then she would make certain his children never knew he did either. The car vanished into the snow, and Viktor Romanov became exactly what he had always feared becoming: his father, present day. The manor house still stood on the edge of the frozen landscape, but it was larger now, a fortress of glass and steel that had consumed the original structure like a glacier swallowing a village. Solar panels lined the rooftops, satellite dishes crowned the towers, security cameras watched every approach with unblinking electronic eyes. Viktor Romanov was 53 years old, and he had never been more powerful or more alone. His empire had grown beyond anything his father could have imagined. Romanov Industries controlled 12% of Russia's steel production, 18% of its natural gas exports, and owned technology patents that generated more revenue in a single quarter than some nations produced in a year. He sat on boards, he advised ministers, he had the private numbers of 3 heads of state, and every night he ate dinner alone at a table built for 20, listening to the wind outside and wondering if any of it had been worth the cost. He had never married, never fathered children, or so he believed. The Kozlov group had been dismantled years ago, their leaders dead or imprisoned, their assets absorbed into his own portfolio. The threat that had driven him to send Nia away no longer existed. But she had never come back. He had tried to find her once, 5 years after she left, when the last of the Kozlovs had been neutralized. He had hired investigators, traced the money he had given her, followed the trail across 3 continents. But the trail had gone cold in a small apartment building in a city far from Russia, and no one remembered the woman who had lived there briefly before vanishing again. Eventually, he stopped. Looking, he told himself it was better this way. She had built a new life. She had found the happiness he could not give her. She was free, but late at night, when the wind howled against his windows like a chorus of ghosts, Viktor Romanov would take out the bottle of vodka he kept in his desk and drink until the memories blurred enough to let him sleep. This was his life now, an empire without an heir, a legacy without a future, a fortress without a heart, until the night everything changed. It began with a flicker on a screen. Viktor was in his private office when his chief of security burst through the doors without knocking, an offense that would normally result in immediate termination. But the look on the man's face stopped Viktor's rebuke before it could form. Someone was inside their systems, not probing the outer defenses, not testing the firewalls, inside, deep inside. They had bypassed 17 layers of encryption and were currently downloading files from servers that were not even supposed to be connected to the internet. Viktor crossed to the security station, his footsteps echoing through the corridor like gunshots. The technicians were panicking, their fingers flying across keyboards as they tried to trace the intrusion, to cut it off, to understand how anyone could have penetrated security measures that had cost 200 million rubles to implement. The answer appeared on the main screen in stark white text. The attack was not coming from outside. The signal was originating from inside the Romanov Industries secure facility, a building 3 kilometers away that housed the most sensitive files in the company's possession. Someone had broken in. Viktor felt something he had not experienced in years: surprise. The secure facility was a fortress within a fortress, biometric locks, motion sensors, armed guards on 24-hour rotation. The building had been designed by the same architects who built bunkers for heads of state. No one should have been able to breach it, but someone had. He demanded a visual from the facility's internal cameras. The screens flickered, then displayed a cascade of error messages. The cameras had been disabled, not destroyed, but looped, playing recorded footage of empty corridors while the real intruders moved unseen through the building. Viktor made a decision. He ordered a full lockdown of the facility, every door sealed, every window shuttered, every exit blocked. If the intruders were inside, they were now trapped. And then he did something his security team had never seen him do. He retrieved a weapon from the safe behind his desk. It was a custom piece designed for him by a gunsmith in Prague who had since passed away. Viktor had not fired it in 15 years. He had not needed to. When you controlled an empire as vast as his, you paid other people to handle violence. But tonight was different. Tonight, someone had violated his sanctuary. Someone had penetrated defenses he had believed impenetrable. Someone had made Viktor Romanov feel vulnerable, and that was an offense he would address personally. The drive to the facility took 7 minutes through roads that had been cleared of snow by crews who worked through the night to keep the Romanov routes passable. Viktor sat in the back of his armored vehicle, watching the frozen landscape blur past, and felt something ancient stirring in his chest. His father had been a hard man, cruel even by most standards, but he had taught Viktor one immutable truth. No one steals from a Romanov. Not money, not secrets, not dignity. Anyone who tried would be found, and they would be made an example of. Viktor had softened over the years. The ruthlessness that had built his empire had given way to a cold efficiency that preferred lawyers to enforcers. But tonight, as the secure facility loomed in his windshield like a wounded animal, Viktor felt his father's ghost settling over his shoulders. Whoever was inside that building had made a fatal miscalculation. They had assumed Viktor Romanov was just a businessman. They were about to learn otherwise. The facility rose from the snow like a monument to paranoia. No windows on the lower floors, reinforced concrete walls capable of withstanding a direct missile strike. The main entrance was a bank vault door that required 3 separate authentication protocols to open. Viktor's security team was already assembled, 12 men in tactical gear, armed with weapons far more modern than the antique in Viktor's hand. They briefed him as he approached. The intruders were still inside, likely in the server room on the 3rd sub-level. All exits were sealed. There was no escape. Viktor ordered his men to establish a perimeter around the server room, but not to engage. He would handle this personally. His chief of security protested. The intruders could be armed, they could be dangerous, they could be working for any number of hostile interests who would love to see Viktor Romanov eliminated. Viktor silenced him with a look. He had built this company from the ashes of his father's failures. He had survived assassination attempts, hostile takeovers, and 20 years of solitude that had hollowed him out until nothing remained but will and purpose. If someone wanted to end the Romanov legacy tonight, they would have to do it while looking him in the eye. He entered the facility alone. The interior was dark, emergency lighting only, casting long shadows across corridors designed to confuse and disorient. Viktor moved through them with the certainty of a man who had personally approved every blueprint. He knew this building better than anyone alive. The intruders did not know he was coming. They did not know that the man they had been systematically destroying for 18 months was now hunting them through the darkness, his footsteps silent, his weapon raised, his heart beating with something that felt almost like anticipation. For 18 months, someone calling themselves the Collective had been dismantling his empire from the shadows, hacking into secure systems, leaking damaging documents, draining accounts through cryptocurrency transactions that could not be traced. Viktor's investigators had found nothing, no faces, no names, no trail to follow. But now, finally, the ghosts had made themselves corporeal, and Viktor was about to make them regret it. The 3rd sub-level was a maze of server towers, black monoliths that hummed with the collected data of 3 decades. Temperature-controlled air circulated through the space, cold enough to see breath, carrying the faint ozone smell of overworked electronics. Viktor moved between the towers like a shadow, his weapon leading the way. His eyes had adjusted to the darkness, picking out shapes and movements that would have been invisible to anyone else. 30 years of surviving in a world where trust was a liability had honed his instincts to a razor's edge. He heard them before he saw them. Soft voices, the click of keyboards, the subtle whir of data being transferred at speeds that should not have been possible on isolated servers. They were close, just beyond the next row of towers, their backs to him, focused on their work. Viktor paused. He controlled his breathing. He raised his weapon. And then he stepped around the corner. Two figures stood before the central server terminal. They were dressed in tactical black, their faces obscured by masks, their fingers frozen on keyboards that glowed with stolen data. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the hum of the servers and the distant whisper of the ventilation system. Viktor's voice cut through the silence like a blade through ice. He told them the game was over. He told them to step away from the terminal, to raise their hands, to turn around slowly. He told them that the facility was locked down, that there was no escape, that their only option was surrender. The figures did not move. He repeated his command, his voice hardening with each word. He had not survived this long by making idle threats. If they did not comply in the next 3 seconds, he would be forced to take measures that would make compliance irrelevant. Slowly, the figures raised their hands. Slowly, they stepped away from the terminal. Slowly, they turned around. Viktor had expected many things. Mercenaries, perhaps. Soldiers of fortune hired by one of his many competitors. Or corporate spies, the kind of slick operators who sold secrets to the highest bidder. Or perhaps even assassins, finally come to collect on the many debts Viktor had accumulated over the years. What he did not expect was this. 2 young women stood before him. They could not have been older than 20. Their faces, now revealed as they pulled away their masks, were identical, mirror images of each other with high cheekbones and dark eyes that showed no fear, despite the weapon aimed at their hearts. Twins. Viktor's first thought was that this was some kind of trick, a distraction, a ploy to throw him off balance while the real threat approached from behind. He listened for footsteps, for the click of a weapon being readied, but there was nothing. Just these 2 young women standing before him with the kind of calm that usually took decades to develop. He demanded to know who they were, who had sent them, what they wanted with his files. The one on the left spoke first. Her voice was cold, controlled, carrying an accent that Viktor could not quite place. She told him they were exactly who he thought they were. The ones who had been dismantling his empire for the past 18 months. The ones who had stolen his secrets, drained his accounts, turned his partners against him. The collective, just the 2 of them. Viktor almost laughed. 2 teenagers, no matter how skilled, could not have accomplished what the collective had accomplished. The level of sophistication required, the resources, the inside knowledge. It was impossible. The one on the right spoke now. Her voice carried the same cold control, but there was something else beneath it, something that sounded almost like hatred. She told him they had been planning this for 6 years, every hack, every leak, every dollar stolen. It had all been building toward this moment. The moment they could look Viktor Romanov in the eye and watch him understand what he had lost. Viktor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature-controlled air. There was something in their eyes, something familiar that he could not quite identify. Something that made his instincts scream that he was missing a crucial piece of information. He stepped forward, keeping his weapon trained on them, trying to get a better look at their faces in the dim emergency lighting. The emergency lights flickered, a power fluctuation, nothing more. And for a brief instant, the server room was bathed in full illumination. Viktor saw their faces, clearly, for the first time, and his blood turned to ice. He saw eyes that were too familiar, eyes that stared back at him from his mirror every morning, eyes that had belonged to his father, his grandfather, generations of Romanov blood stretching back centuries. His eyes, his blood, but that was impossible. He had no children. He had never. And then his gaze dropped and the world stopped spinning. Around the neck of the woman on the right, half hidden beneath her tactical vest, hung a gold locket, ornate, ancient, with the Romanov crest etched into its surface, the locket he had given Nia 20 years ago. His mother's locket. Viktor's weapon wavered, his breath caught in his chest. His mind, usually so sharp and calculating, struggled to process what he was seeing. It was not possible. It could not be possible. And yet the locket hung there, catching the flickering light, and the young women stared at him with eyes that were unmistakably his own. Quick pause. The expert said, "A story about a broken family would not work on YouTube. They said you only want simple action, simple confrontation, simple resolutions. But if you want to see a father realize he nearly destroyed his own legacy, if you want to see a man stare into the eyes of the daughters he never knew existed and understand what his cowardice truly cost, tap that subscribe button right now. Join the wolf pack. Let us see if Viktor Romanov deserves forgiveness or if his own blood will bury him. Now, back to the story. Viktor's weapon lowered without conscious decision. His hand, the hand that had never trembled, not in boardrooms or battlefields or the darkest moments of his solitary life, began to shake. He spoke, and his voice sounded foreign to his own ears, broken, uncertain. He asked about the locket. He asked where they had gotten it. He told them it had belonged to his mother, that he had given it away 20 years ago, that it was impossible for them to have it unless the young woman wearing the locket cut him off. Her voice carried no warmth, no sympathy, nothing but cold satisfaction at watching him struggle. She told him their mother had given it to them. She told him their mother had kept it all these years as a reminder of what the great Viktor Romanov truly was. A coward, a liar, a man who had thrown away the only people who could have loved him without wanting anything in return. Viktor's legs threatened to give way. He steadied himself against a server tower, the cold metal biting into his palm, anchoring him to reality as the truth crashed over him like an avalanche. Naya had been pregnant. Nia had been pregnant when he sent her away, and these women, these brilliant, fierce, terrifying women who had spent 18 months systematically dismantling everything he had built, were his daughters. Viktor struggled to find words. For a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals and faced down oligarchs who killed as easily as they breathed, he found himself utterly speechless. His daughters stood before him, and all he could do was stare at the locket that proved his greatest mistake had consequences he never imagined. The twin on the left spoke now. Her voice carried the same cold fury as her sister's, but Viktor detected something else beneath it, a pain so deep it had calcified into something unbreakable. She asked him if he wanted to know why they had spent 6 years learning how to destroy him. She asked him if he wanted to understand the fuel that had driven them through sleepless nights of coding, through years of planning, through every moment they had dedicated to watching his empire crumble. Viktor nodded. He could not speak. He could only listen. She told him about their childhood, about a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, while the man who had fathered them lived in a fortress surrounded by more wealth than some nations possessed, about winters without heat, without adequate food, without any of the resources that could have been theirs if their father had possessed an ounce of courage. She told him about the apartment where they had grown up, 2 rooms for 4 people with a bathroom down the hall shared with 6 other families. About their mother coming home at 2 in the morning, exhausted beyond words, only to wake at 6 to start the cycle again. And then she told him about their sister. Viktor felt the word before he understood it. Sister, plural. These were twins, but she had said 4 people in 2 rooms. The twin wearing the locket stepped forward now, her eyes, his eyes, burned with a grief that had never healed. She told him they had been triplets, 3 sisters born on the same night in a hospital that almost refused to admit their mother because she could not prove she had insurance. 3 hearts beating together, 3 lives beginning together, 3 futures that should have stretched out before them like endless possibility. Their names were Katya, Elena, and Tati. Tati had been the smallest, the most fragile. She had been born with lungs that never quite worked properly, a condition that modern medicine could have managed easily if their family had access to modern medicine. If they had money for specialists, for treatments, for the simple interventions that children of wealthy families received without question. But they had none of those things. Their mother had begged doctors for help. She had sold everything she owned, including pieces of the Romanov locket's chain, 1 link at a time, to pay for whatever treatments she could afford. She had held Tati through endless nights of labored breathing, praying to every god she could name for a miracle that never came. Tati had died 3 weeks before her 7th birthday, pneumonia, a disease that should not have been fatal, would not have been fatal if they had possessed the resources to treat it properly. They had buried her in a public cemetery. No headstone. Those cost money they did not have. Just a small marker with a number, lost among rows of identical markers belonging to other children whose families had been too poor to save them. Viktor dropped his weapon. It clattered against the floor of the server room, but he did not hear it. He did not hear anything except the echo of his daughter's words. A triplet, 3 daughters, and one of them was dead because he had been too afraid to keep their mother safe. He tried to speak, to apologize, to explain, to say anything that might bridge the chasm of 20 years and one tiny grave. But before he could form words, another voice spoke, a voice he had not heard in 2 decades, a voice that haunted his dreams. Naya stepped out from behind a server tower. She had been there the whole time, guiding her daughters through their comms, watching the confrontation unfold, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal herself. She was older now. Lines had formed around her eyes and silver threaded through her dark hair, but she was still beautiful, still carried herself with the same quiet strength that had captivated Viktor from the first moment he saw her. And she looked at him with eyes that held nothing but cold, patient fury. She told him the girls were the legacy he had thrown away, the family he had sacrificed on the altar of his fear. She asked him how it felt to finally understand what his cowardice had cost. Viktor took a step toward her, his hand outstretched, her name falling from his lips like a prayer. She did not move away, but she did not accept his touch either. She simply stood there, a wall of 20 years between them, and continued speaking in that same cold, measured voice. She told him about the night she left, about discovering she was pregnant 2 weeks before he summoned her to his study to tell her she was nothing but a distraction, about holding that knowledge inside her like a secret weapon, fully intending to tell him, fully expecting him to change his mind once he knew. But then he had spoken those words, called her a diversion, dismissed 3 years of love as a pleasant mistake. And she had decided that a man who could say those things did not deserve to know about the lives growing inside her. She had walked out into the snow with the Romanov locket clutched in her hand and a vow burning in her heart. Her children would never know the monster who had fathered them. They would never be corrupted by his world of power and cruelty. They would grow up believing their father was a stranger who had died before they were born. And they had. Until the day they discovered the truth. Viktor fell to his knees on the frozen floor of the server room. He looked up at the 3 women standing before him, the love he had lost, the daughters he had never known, and between them, the ghost of a child who had died because of his cowardice, and felt something inside him shatter beyond repair. He tried to apologize. The words came out broken, inadequate, falling apart in the air between them. He told them he had sent Naya away to protect her, that his enemies would have killed her if they had known how much she mattered, that everything he had done out of love. Katya, the one without the locket, the one whose voice carried the sharpest edge, laughed. It was not a sound of amusement. It was the sound of decades of suffering compressed into a single, bitter breath. She asked him if he called it love, sending a pregnant woman into the world with nothing but a locket and 3 months of expense money, forcing her to raise 3 children in poverty while he accumulated more wealth than he could spend in 100 lifetimes, letting his daughter die because he was too afraid to fight for the people who mattered. If that was love, she told him, then love was more destructive than hate. Viktor had no defense. Everything she said was true. And then the lights went out. The darkness lasted. Only a moment before emergency lights flickered back to life, bathing the server room in bloody red. But in that moment, everything changed. Viktor's security chief's voice crackled through his earpiece, panicked, urgent, stripped of all professional composure. The facility was under attack. Armed men had breached the perimeter. Explosions had disabled the main entrance. The security team was pinned down and taking casualties. The Kozlovs. No. Viktor corrected himself immediately. The Kozlov group had been destroyed years ago, but others had risen to take their place. The Volkov Syndicate. Competitors who had been circling Viktor's wounded empire like sharks smelling blood in the water. They must have been watching the collective's movements, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. And tonight, with Viktor's security focused on the server room, they had found it. Naya was already moving, pulling her daughters behind a server tower as the sound of gunfire echoed through the corridors above. Her voice was calm, the voice of a woman who had spent 20 years surviving in a world that offered her no protection. She asked Viktor what was happening, who was attacking, how they were going to get out. Viktor retrieved his fallen weapon and checked the magazine. His hands had stopped shaking. The revelation of his daughters, the weight of his guilt, all of it was still there. But it had been pushed aside by something older and more primal, the instinct to protect. He told them the building was surrounded. The attackers would try to breach the server room to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. There was no escape route that the Volkovs would not have covered. Their only option was to defend this position until reinforcements arrived. Elena, the one wearing the locket, stepped out from behind the server tower. Her voice carried no fear, only calculation. She told him they had mapped this entire facility over the past 18 months. Every corridor, every security system, every structural weakness. If they could reach the secondary control room on sub-level 2, they could trigger a facility-wide lockdown that would seal the Volkovs in the upper levels while they escaped through the maintenance tunnels. Viktor stared at his daughter, this stranger who was also his blood, and felt something stir in his chest. She was brilliant. They both were. They had outsmarted his security, dismantled his empire, and even now, faced with mortal danger, they were already 3 steps ahead. They were Romanovs. Viktor made a decision. He told them he would clear the path to the secondary control room. They would follow, using their knowledge of the facility to guide them through the fastest route. Their mother would stay in the center, protected from all sides. Katya stepped forward, a weapon materializing in her hand from somewhere beneath her tactical vest. She told Viktor she did not need his protection. She had been protecting herself for 19 years. She was not about to stop now. Viktor met her eyes, his eyes, and saw the same stubborn determination that had driven him to build an empire from nothing. He told her this was not about protection, this was about tactics. He knew how to fight. She knew how to think. Together they had a chance. Apart they would die. The gunfire was closer now. Voices shouting in Russian, military commands, tactical formations. The Volkovs had brought professionals. Nia's voice cut through the tension. She told them to stop arguing. Their sister was dead because the adults in her life had failed to work together. She would not watch her surviving daughters die for the same reason. The words hung in the air like a judgment. Viktor nodded. Katya lowered her weapon slightly, and together the 4 of them moved toward the door. The corridors of sub-level 3 were a labyrinth of shadows and flickering lights. Viktor moved ahead, his weapon raised, his senses straining for any sign of the enemy. Behind him, Katya and Elena flanked their mother, their movements coordinated with a precision that spoke of years of training together. They had become this: fighters, survivors, warriors, because he had failed to give them any other option. The first Volkov soldier appeared around a corner without warning. Viktor's weapon spoke before his mind could process. Muscle memory from a younger, more violent version of himself. The soldier fell. Viktor did not slow down. More came. The corridors became a running battle. Viktor and his daughters fighting in tandem as if they had trained together their entire lives. Elena called out position. She had memorized the facility's layout down to the placement of individual support beams. Katya covered angles, her shots precise and economical. And Viktor did what he had always done. He absorbed the danger. He put himself between the bullets and the people he was protecting. They were 30 meters from the secondary control, a room when the grenade came. Viktor saw it first, the small cylinder bouncing across the floor toward Katya's feet. Time seemed to slow. His daughter's eyes widened with recognition. But there was no time to run, no time to duck, no time to do anything but watch the explosion approach. Viktor moved without thinking. He threw himself toward Katya, his body between her and the blast. The explosion lifted him off his feet and threw him against the corridor wall. Pain, blinding, electric, all-consuming, ripped through his side. He felt blood, hot and immediate, soaking through his shirt, but Katya was alive. He had reached her in time. He had shielded her from the blast. He had, for the first time in his life, protected his daughter. Consciousness flickered like a dying light. Viktor was aware of hands dragging him, his daughters, he realized, pulling him toward the control room. He was aware of Nia's voice, sharp with fear, commanding him to stay awake. He was aware of the pain, a living thing that had wrapped itself around his ribs and refused to let go. But most of all, he was aware of Katya's face hovering above him, her eyes, his eyes, filled with something he had never expected to see there. Concern. She told him to stay with them. She told him they had not come this far to watch him die in a corridor. She told him he did not get to escape what he owed them by bleeding out on a concrete floor. Viktor almost laughed. Even now, even while saving his life, his daughter could not resist reminding him of his failures. She was definitely a Romanov. They reached the control room. Elena's fingers flew across the console, a symphony of commands that Viktor could not have understood even if his vision were not blurring at the edges. Nia pressed something against his wound, applying pressure that sent fresh waves of agony through his body. And then the facility's emergency systems activated. Blast doors slammed shut throughout the building. The Volkov soldiers, caught between levels, found themselves trapped in kill zones with no escape. Viktor's remaining security forces, coordinating with Elena through the facility's communication system, began a systematic sweep. The siege was over. Dawn came slowly, as it always did in this part of the world. The snow had stopped falling, and weak sunlight filtered through the clouds, painting the frozen landscape in shades of gray and gold. Viktor lay in a hospital bed that had been set up in his private quarters at the manor. The wound in his side was serious, but not fatal. The doctors had removed fragments of shrapnel, stitched what needed stitching, and informed him with professional detachment that he would be uncomfortable for several weeks, but would make a full recovery. He had been lucky, they said. Lucky. Viktor stared at the ceiling and wondered what luck even meant anymore. The Volkov syndicate had been devastated. 18 of their soldiers had been killed or captured in the facility. Assault. Their leadership, exposed by files that Elena had downloaded before the attack, was facing imminent arrest on charges ranging from corporate espionage to attempted murder. The threat they had represented was, for all practical purposes, eliminated. But Viktor found he did not care about the Volkovs. He only cared about the 3 women waiting in the corridor outside his room. Nia entered first. She stood at the foot of his bed, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The years had changed her, added depths to her eyes, steel to her posture, but Viktor could still see the woman he had loved, the woman he had never stopped loving, even when he had convinced himself that love was a weakness he could not afford. He told her he was sorry. The words seemed pitifully inadequate, but they were all he had. He told her he had spent 20 years believing he had made the right choice, believing that sending her away had protected her from his enemies, from his world, from the violence that surrounded him like a permanent storm. He had convinced himself that her safety was more important than his happiness. That sacrifice was the highest form of love. But he had been wrong. He had not protected her. He had abandoned her. He had forced her to face the world alone, to raise 3 children without resources, to watch one of them die because he had been too much of a coward to fight for what mattered. He asked her to forgive him. Nia was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried no warmth, but it carried no venom either. She was tired, Viktor realized, tired of hating him, tired of carrying the weight of his failures alongside her own. She told him forgiveness was not hers to give. It would have to come from the daughters who had grown up without a father, from the grave of the daughter who would never grow up at all. She could offer him something else, though. She could offer him the truth. Viktor's daughters approached his bed with the wariness of soldiers entering enemy territory. They had every right to hate him, every right to walk away and let him spend the rest of his life in the tomb of his own making, but they were still here. Viktor asked them what they wanted, not what he could give them. He had already decided to give them everything, whether they wanted it or not. But what they actually wanted from him, from this moment, from whatever future might still be possible. Katya spoke first. Her voice was harder than her sister's, sharper around the edges. She told him she wanted answers, real answers. Not the sanitized version he had told himself to justify his choices, but the truth about who he was and why he had done what he had done. She wanted to know if he had ever thought about them, if he had ever wondered whether Nia had been pregnant, if he had ever, in 20 years, considered the possibility that there were Romanovs in the world who did not know his name. Viktor answered honestly. He told her he had tried to find Nia 5 years after she left. He told her the trail had gone cold. He told her that he had convinced himself it was better that way, that she had built a new life, found happiness, moved on from the damage he had caused. He had been a coward then, too. Elena spoke next. Her voice was quieter than her sister's, but no less fierce. She told him about Tati, not the clinical details, the disease, the poverty, the grave with no headstone, but the person, their sister. She told him Tati had loved to draw, that she had filled notebooks with pictures of the family she dreamed of having someday, a big house with a garden, a dog named Mishka, a father who came home every night and read stories before bed. She told him Tati had never stopped believing he would come for them. Even at the end, when the fever was burning her alive, she had asked their mother if their father would be there when she woke up. She had died, still waiting. Viktor closed his eyes. The pain in his side was nothing compared to the weight of his daughter's words. He had failed Tati in every way a father could fail a child. He could never make that right. He could never bring her back. But he could make certain her sisters never wanted for anything again. Viktor pushed himself upright, ignoring the protest of his wound. He looked at his daughters, these fierce, brilliant, terrifying women who had spent 6 years learning how to destroy him, and made them an offer. Everything. Not just money, though the money was vast beyond comprehension. Not just property, though the properties spanned 3 continents. Everything that bore the Romanov name. The companies, the assets, the power, the legacy. He told them they had already proven they could take it by force. They had outsmarted him, outmaneuvered him, brought his empire to its knees through sheer skill and determination. But taking it by force would mean years of legal battles, investigations, complications that would drain their energy and distract from whatever future they wanted to build. He was offering them a simpler path. He was offering to step aside, to transfer controlling interest in Romanov Industries to both of them equally, to spend whatever time he had left serving as an advisor if they wanted him, or disappearing entirely if they did not. The only thing he asked in return was the chance to know them, to learn who they were, to hear about Tati from people who had actually loved her, to be present in whatever capacity they would allow for whatever came next. He was not asking for forgiveness. He had not earned it, and he might never earn it. He was asking for the opportunity to try. Katya and Elena exchanged a look. It was the kind of look that only twins could share, an entire conversation compressed into a single glance. Viktor watched them communicate without words and felt something stir in his chest. They were extraordinary, and they were his. Finally, Katya turned back to him. Her voice was still hard, but something had shifted beneath the surface. She told him they would take the empire. They would rebuild it, tear out the rot, establish legitimate operations, transform it into something their sister would have been proud to inherit. But they had conditions. First, the Tati Foundation. Every year on the anniversary of her death, Romanov Industries would fund medical care for children whose families could not afford it. No exceptions, no limits. Until no child ever died the way Tati had died. Second, Viktor would learn to be a father, not a boss, not a patron, a father. He would attend birthdays and graduations and ordinary dinners that had no purpose except being together. He would learn their favorite foods, their hopes, their fears. He would become a person, not a power. Third, he would never lie to them about anything, ever. They had spent their entire lives surrounded by lies. Lies about who they were, where they came from, why they had grown up in poverty while their father built monuments to his own ego. That ended now. Viktor accepted every condition without hesitation. Nia stepped forward then. She stood beside her daughters, looking down at the man who had broken her heart 20 years ago, and asked him a question. She asked him if it had been worth it. The empire, the power, the fortress of solitude he had built around himself. Had any of it been worth what he had lost? Viktor met her eyes. The same eyes that had once looked at him with love, then with hatred, and now with something in between. He told her no. Nothing was worth what he had lost. Nothing had ever been worth it. And he had known that from the moment she walked out of his study into the snow. He had simply been too weak to admit it. He had been punishing himself ever since. Not consciously. He had convinced himself he was building an empire, securing a legacy, but the truth was simpler and uglier. He had been dying slowly, year by year, in a prison of his own making. And now, finally, he wanted to live. They did not embrace. There would be no sudden reconciliation, no tears of joy, no pretending that 20 years of pain could be erased in a single moment. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with awkward silences and old wounds reopening and trust that would have to be rebuilt one fragile brick at a time. But they were willing to walk it. Katya and Elena helped their father to his feet. The first time they had touched him voluntarily, the first time they had seen him as something other than an enemy to be destroyed. Nia stood nearby, not touching him, but not turning away either. Together they moved to the window that overlooked the estate. The snow stretched out before them, pristine and unbroken, glittering in the morning light. Somewhere beneath that snow, spring was waiting. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a future was taking shape. Uncertain, fragile, but real. Viktor stood between his daughters, the stranger who was learning to be their father, and looked out at the world he had spent 30 years conquering. It seemed smaller now, less important. The empire would survive. It would transform into something new. Under his daughter's leadership, something cleaner, more purposeful, more worthy of the name it bore. The Romanov legacy would continue, but it would be a legacy of healing now, not harm. And in a cemetery far from this frozen landscape, a new monument was being planned. White marble reaching toward the sky, inscribed with a name that would never be forgotten. Tati Romanov, beloved daughter, beloved sister, the one who believed. 1999 to 2005, Viktor spoke into the silence. He told his daughters he had never asked about Tati's favorite color. Elena answered, blue. She had loved the color blue, like the sky on the rare clear days when the sun broke through the clouds. Viktor nodded. He filed that information away in a place reserved for things that mattered. The first of many things he would learn. The first step on a road that might someday lead to something like redemption. Some stories end with vengeance. Some stories end with forgiveness. This one ends with something harder than either. This one ends with a family standing at a window, watching the snow melt, waiting for spring, waiting for the chance to become what they should have been all along. Viktor Romanov had built an empire that spanned continents, but on this morning, standing beside the daughters he had never known and the woman he had never stopped loving, he understood that his greatest achievement was still ahead of him. Learning to be worthy of the people who had every right to destroy him. Learning to be their father. The Romanov name would survive, but more importantly, so would they.